You may have played poker, but playing poker in Texas is a different animal. This is the Texas Poker Podcast with Tyler and Clint.
Hello, this is the Texas Poker Podcast. I'm Tyler. This is Clint.
What's up, y'all?
And we are back with episode 21.
Back with episode 21. So, Tyler, you have an interesting story that I am very, very interested in. New Orleans is probably one of my favorite places and most memorable places to play poker in my life. I'm very, very curious on your first time going to New Orleans and playing poker, what you thought of it.
Right, so I went to Harrah's, and, okay, well, I guess this is one thing, just kind of, if you're thinking about going, to consider. When you go, you have to have the vaccination card and your ID when you get into the casino. That was something new to me. And also, I went with my girlfriend to play, right? And she would, because in Houston, a lot of times she's been able to just, either sit behind, sit near the table, maybe not at the table, but in the area. I'm sure you've seen that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's pretty... Well, she wasn't able to in New Orleans?
So when we went there, I just assumed, and I asked them, and they were like, nope, you can't sit, can't even be in the poker room. I said, can she sit at an empty poker table and be on her phone? They said, nope, can't even be in here.
So I'm guessing this all has to do with the COVID, right?
Yes.
I mean, I guess it's understandable, because if you remember back, New Orleans, outside of New York, was probably one of the hardest hit areas in the very beginning. And, New Orleans is such a touristy place that thrives on that economy. I guess I can see where they would be a little overprotective, on there. I mean, it's hard to find fault with that. I mean, it seems like a empty poker table would be just fine. But you got to think, I mean, there's other people playing. If one person can do it, then another person can do it. I don't find any fault with them on that.
Oh, me neither. I was just saying that that's something that they're implementing there. So I went, and they had 2 tables going, 2 full tables. I had to wait. I was on the list. I finally get on the table, and it was like me and one other guy were kind of deep. He covered me by quite a bit, but everyone else was around maybe 300 to 400. The first interesting hand that happened was I had 9-8. I think I was in the big blind, I believe. Yes, it was 9-8 offsuit. I was in the big blind. It's limped around. I get to see a free flop.
Okay, that's I kind of like 9-8 offsuit. I mean, for the big blind, that's kind of a nice kind of big blind hand to have.
Especially when the flop comes 8-9 jack rainbow.
Ooh, man, flopping 2 pair. Seems like kind of a dangerous board, but I mean, this is a great flop for you.
Exactly. I mean, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking this is perfect, I mean, okay, so it's multi-way, so there's always risk involved, right? Because you don't have, it was limp, so you don't really have much information, right? Everyone's playing any 2 cards.
Yeah, I mean, and people would imp with, queen 10 off and a lot of, maybe 9-10. There's a lot of limps that would kind of hit this board a little bit.
Right, so I kind of proceed with a little bit of caution. But I do bet. I feel like I have to bet. I bet, I think it was 15.
I assume the pot was probably 25, maybe, or what did you bet pot?
No, sorry, I did not bet 15. I bet 10. I bet pot. Very small bet, in the game.
Yeah.
The guy to my left immediately raises, but he makes it 25, and then the next player snap calls the 25.
Okay.
Obviously, you're calling, right?
Obviously, I'm calling. Yeah, I mean, this hand is way too strong. Even if I think I might be up against there's a lot of things like Jack 10, 9-10, 8-10. There are a lot of pair plus draws that are just going to be in there. So I'm definitely calling with 8-9 here.
All right, and the turn is the King of Hearts, which on a rainbow now it brings a backdoor heart draw, which is kind of just something to keep in mind.
Okay.
I check it to him, and he bets 35 again. And the player behind him, she snap calls. And I was kind of like, well, I ended up folding because I was thinking after I bet, get raised, called, I feel like I could possibly be beat here. What do you think?
I mean, you definitely could possibly be
Yeah.
here. I mean, Queen 10 is definitely a possibility. As well as Jack 8, Jack 9. I think the odds may be too good for me to fold here. Because, I mean, okay, it was 25, 20, so 75. Plus maybe that was 10 in the pot, 85. So 35, 70. So it's about 35 to win 150.
Yes.
So I think I have to call here. I mean, like I say, there's a lot of pair plus flush draws or pair plus draws and stuff. I don't love it. I mean, I definitely think Queen 10 is definitely a possibility. I mean, I can definitely see a fold. I think the odds are just going to sucker me in here.
So I end up folding. And so then the river was a blank, like a deuce of clubs, right?
Okay.
He bets again, a gigantic amount, like 125, I think, 150.
Oh God, that's such a huge bet versus his other two.
She snap calls, and he turns over Jack 10 for top pair.
So he flopped top pair open ended.
Yeah.
And what did she show?
She never did.
Oh, so he wins with just top pair.
Yeah, so that was a pretty hurtful hand for me.
That's a pretty hurtful hand. I mean, I guess if you're going, God damn, what did she call? Now I am very concerned with what she called with there. That makes no sense to me.
Well, I guess we'll hope that she's not listening. But I mean, she ended up being a pretty new player, and was just kind of
just all over the map.
Yeah, rebuying.
I'm guessing you didn't realize that before you made this fold. I mean, yeah, because I mean this action looks very strong. Re-raise and snap call, and then a bet call. So I'm guessing they kind of figured that out later on in the session.
Exactly, but this was my second hand at the table, so it was kind of I was kind of kicking myself over that one afterward, that he had just overvalued his hand.
Yeah, I don't fault your fold by any means. I mean, I think a lot of times you're going to be up against maybe a.
But here's the thing.
Here's the problem is you kind of block most of the hands that beat you. Like the only thing you're really worried about is Queen 10, but it's definitely possible.
Well, but here's the other thing. Do I ever get to showdown if he bets 125, 150 on the river and she calls? I mean, are you just stacking off with bottom two?
I mean, but here's the problem is is with jacks are never. We both know jacks are never there because someone's going to raise that pre-flop,
right?
With you double blocking Jack 8, Jack 9, I mean, you're going to see Queen 10 here a lot. I mean, which is obviously what you're worried about.
Right.
But, I don't know. That's a tough hand. I mean, in these multi-way pots, it's a really tough, not much you can make of it. But, I mean, I would expect to see, like, a Jack 10 type hand, or either that or 9-10 or something like that. But, yeah, I don't know. That's kind of a rough hand. I mean, it's probably a good fold if if that person was, like, a legitimate player of her calling. But here's the other thing is, you're getting actually better odds with her calling because I think she could never have Queen 10, or else she would have raised.
I mean, all that's 100% true, but when it's someone who's, I mean, again, I didn't know at the time that she was such a new player.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, I saw her call down with like middle pair for all the money.
I mean, at the time, you can only work with the information that you have. So, I think a lot of times you made the right fold, and it's just you're gonna be down. But that's a rough spot.
So then that hand happened. I was kind of annoyed. I mean, I was just annoyed with myself. I was like, ugh, could have been played better, I guess. It's what I was thinking at the time, right?
Yeah.
The most results oriented at the table I am.
Oh yeah.
I mean, so I lost that hand, and then I played a few other hands where like I tried getting some guy off of an overpair whenever the front door flush came in, and an obvious straight came in.
Okay.
Didn't work. I mean that's the moral of that story. Didn't work.
I mean, you can get people off of these hands better than I mean, it's always hard, like in low limit poker. I mean, I always talk about like the threshold. Like, there's just certain people who are never folding an overpair. I think now that you've gotten to higher limits, like you're actually playing with players who can actually do that. So dipping back down into lower limits is, now you're up against a player who thinks that it's going to be the nuts every time.
Well, I'm up against a player who thinks it's going to... He says, I'm going to see a flush, but F it, I don't care. I call.
Yeah, this is why. This is why it took you so long to get me to start bluffing like low limit poker, is because of stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, and you want to talk about just your heart sinking, is when you're trying to put in that bluff and he's debating, and all you hear is, F it, I'm not full. I'm just like, oh, God. I'm just like, well, that's not going to work.
YOLO, motherfucker!
Yeah, exactly. I'm just like, huh.
Yeah, that's not what you want to hear when you're on a stone cold bluff.
So like, it was a lot of hands like that where, I mean, the guy to my right actually got overpairs to me quite a bit, or like he played Queen 7 and like, I forgot what I ended up having, but he turned 2 pair. I mean, just kept getting a better hand than me every time. Like, I was thinking at some point this guy has to be bluffing or something. Nope, every time.
Yeah, I think it's hard I do that in sessions, and it gets in my head too, and I'm like, well, at some point, they can't be having it every time. But here's the thing, they can't be having it out every time in the long run, but in these sessions, you can just run hot to no end, I mean, for a couple hours. So, because that always gets in my head too. I'm like, there's just no way every single time. And, at a certain point, you do have to put somebody to the test. But sometimes they pass that with flying colors.
Oh, and I do put them to the test at the end of the session, so I'll tell you about that in just a few minutes. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I want to know I've told many people that this is my favorite place to play poker, actually. What do you think about the casino and the room in general?
The casino was nice. Like the slot machines and stuff, and man, the craps was very high limits.
Oh yeah, God, that kills me.
I mean, because I walked by thinking like possibly they'd have a $5 table, because that would be kind of fun to do, maybe just because I was there. $25 minimum table, so that was off the was not an option for me.
Yeah,
off the menu. There we go.
I think some of theirs is high limits, because in New Orleans are really your only place you can go. So, I mean, if there's 5 casinos, there's got to be a casino that's got to have lower limits, or else everybody's just going to go to the nicest one. But Harrah's has zero competition right there, so I think everything's just a little bit higher limits than normal.
But as far as the poker room, I mean, I didn't think it was anything special. I mean,
I didn't think I just get a good feel about it. It's kind of open, like I like. I kind of like the Mardi Gras type theme and feel of it. And I don't know, there's always just, it seems to have a lot of... Now, here's the other point that it might be way different than when you went, is both times I went was during the WSOP New Orleans.
That would make a lot of sense because what I saw was an empty room with 3 tables, and only one was empty and 2 were being used.
Okay, yeah. See, every time I've gone, it's been like the WSOP New Orleans. I mean, it's just super packed, super busy, super kind of fun, like bluffy, fun games. So I guess that's kind of why I have such a good feeling about that place.
Yeah, none of that was there that night, so...
Does not sound like the best poker trip.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't... that was not a poker trip. I happened to play poker on a trip.
Oh, okay.
Right, so...
Tyler's like, I went there. There was 8 old man coffees on the table.
I mean, because that was what I was going to tell you was... yeah, I played for 2 hours, so... I mean, that's a pretty short session for me.
That is a very short session for you.
Yeah. But I was going to tell you, I found it so interesting that the game literally just felt like whoever made the hand, like no one was bluffing, no one was hero calling. It was just someone would make a hand and just, that was it. It was just whoever made the hand, that hand would win. There was no moves being put on or anything like that.
Well, I think this is the difference in Texas where just it's crazy all the time here. And you go to like a place where it's normal poker and you're like, is this how poker's? I mean, is this just how it is?
I mean, I put a 3-bet in and they were like, that seems like aces. I mean, I almost fell out of my chair laughing. I mean, I don't I mean, I was like, it's definitely not aces. But so here was my concluding hand of this, which, I mean, okay, sure. So I ended up with like ace. I had ace jack suited, and the flop came king queen 3 with 2 diamonds. One of the 3s was a diamond. It wasn't a royal flush draw, but I had a straight draw and a flush draw.
So you have ace jack of diamonds.
Yeah.
And it's king queen 3 diamonds.
King queen and a 3 with 2 diamonds.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah. And then this really aggressive player bets out. I call. He bet, like, he would always bet like 35. So I called the 35. I had raised pre-flop. He just donking into me. So.
Did you think about re-raising?
Thought about it. And then he bet small again on the turn. So then I was like, well, I don't know. I was thinking this was a perfect time to try to make my hand versus him because, he would call very light with like a middle pair and stuff at times.
Okay.
And then I bricked the river, and I ended up going for it, going all in over the top of his small bet on the river.
Okay.
And he called. He called it the Queen 7 offsuit.
I think if you're going to pull this move, I think you have to raise the turn, right?
Definitely not what I did.
Yeah,
I can tell you
mean,
that. Yeah, I think you're right. I think probably jamming the turn, right? As more of a semi-bluff, not a stone cold bluff on the river.
well, I don't even know if it's jamming the turn, but
My stack side, I was very short at that point.
oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
So if you're raising, you're just jamming the turn.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
I got you.
Which is what put me in a weird spot on the turn. If I thought about raising, and then I was like, well, this is then it's a jam, and then I was like, well, I'm not sure really what to do here.
Because I mean, on the river, it's kind of a weird, like to show no strength, to call, show no strength, call, show no strength, and then to bet the river. I mean, I think it's a kind of a tough line to sell.
And that's how you leave Harris with $0. Let's try selling that line. Doesn't work.
Yeah, it's a because I mean, any strong hand would have raised, protecting against the flush draw, and then when you bet, it looks like kind of like a missed flush draw, which it was. Yeah. I mean,
very easy bluff to read. Was red, and I went home. I mean,
yeah, it's I'm glad you got to go to New Orleans before now because right now it looks like it is
tough.
It's a tough situation there. But I was excited to see you take this trip. So New Orleans, I've only done 2 WSOP circuit events. One was in New Orleans, and I had never been to Vegas yet. It was the first deal, and this is kind of what set like the poker trips. I was like, oh, this is cool. Is when I went to New Orleans, I fell in love with that place. I mean, we just played a crap load of poker there and went to bourbon. I mean, you play poker till like 7 o'clock. then go down to Bourbon Street and go down there and drink, cheap drinks all night, and then come back, play poker, and repeat. I was like, oh my God, I love this place. Because I had never been to Vegas, so this is kind of the closest thing to Vegas I knew of at that point.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds amazing. I mean, nowhere close to what I did, but that sounds amazing. I have something kind of interesting for you, though, that happened the session before I went to New Orleans.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm at 88, and so I was playing. I'd run it up a little bit, and then this guy sits down, not really talking much, and then, he starts. I mean, he put just horrible beats on me. Like, he called me just like a gut shot on the river and spiked it to double up and all sorts of stuff. I mean,
that's ever good.
I mean, just it was a tough session for me in this. A few tough hands for me. But then the guy started going crazy. Like, I mean, he put bad beats on me, but the calls he was making, I mean, tons of action, right? I mean, he's doubling up.
You're gonna like going crazy. Do you mean like playing any hand or calling light or just betting pre-flop without seeing his card? Like, to give me a.
Okay, I have the perfect thing that he does every time.
Okay.
Every single hand, 100% of the time, would raise giant pre-flop.
Okay.
And then on any flop, bet gigantic.
Okay. I kind of like this.
But if you 3-bet, he's calling. If you bet, he's calling. I mean, every single time, right?
How big is your stack at this point, you think?
I ended up getting stacked by him, so I ended up adding on for another 1,000. I was in for 500, got stacked, bought in for 1,000 because the table was so deep stacked. I mean, him and the guy to his left both had about it might have been like 5,000 each.
Okay.
Something like that. And I saw him make one of the most ridiculous hero calls. I mean, he had bottom pair, and the guy bet like 3,000 on the river.
Oh God!
And he turns over bottom pair, and he just goes, "I know you're bluffing."
Let me. Can I gamble on something? That guy was not bluffing.
Wait. So he sits there and tells him, "I know you're bluffing. I'm 95% gonna call. What do you want me to do, though? Maybe you can talk me out of calling." And
wow.
The guy's like, "I don't know. You can, And then he was like, "I think you're bluffing." And he just goes, "I call." And the guy had missed his straight draw.
Oh, my God.
He hit 8 high.
When he bet 3,000, how much was in the pot?
A lot. Like 2,000. I mean, it was gigantic.
Better call than I was going to make. I would make probably. Well, I mean, I don't know the context of everything that went down, so it's hard to say, but God almighty. But, I mean, I don't know. I might not kill $3,000 with the nuts. So, I mean, we know how tight I can be sometimes, so.
Well, I mean, the reason why I don't really have much insight on the hand is I was not really paying much attention. It was a heads-up hand, and I'm sure I was texting you about him rivering me, and I'm like, now I'm stuck even more.
Yeah, that makes okay. Well, that all checks out.
And then the guy who he made that call with rebuys, and now this guy, I got mixed up in a gigantic hand with him. I have Ace Jack suited. The flop comes. I 3-bet them. They both call. And the flop comes all hearts, ace high. So it's like ace 7 4 all hearts.
Okay.
And I put out a small bet and then get raised, re-raised. So I was like, wow, this is over for me. So I fold. And they end up playing the biggest pot I've ever seen. So the turn paired the 7.
Okay.
And then on the river, all the money ended up in the middle. It had to have been like 12. I mean, it was gigantic. It was at least 10,000.
Okay.
The guy flopped the nut flush, or like with the king high or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The other guy flopped a set of sevens, turned quads.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So I think he must have been, it was probably about a $12,000 pot, right?
Right.
So now this guy's going crazy on all sorts of action, right?
Right.
And this is the thing I was going to ask you about, which kind of was tough for me because this player wanted action and was going to give a lot of action to make calls and just was there, but you could tell was there to have a good time, right?
Right.
But I had to I was giving him action because no one else really was, and I was talking to him because, a lot of people didn't really know what to do because he was betting gigantic all the time and just going crazy and bluffing everyone. But it's hard to walk that fine line of like giving action to keep the game good and keep that player there because you need that player to stay there, right?
Right.
But then kind of playing badly and giving too much action maybe.
That's a good point. What's amazing is I bet there were people actually at the table who actually wanted the player to leave.
That's crazy to me, but
did you get that sense? Because I've been at a lot of tables where people aren't prepared to play that big, and they just they're like they just want to limp in or something like that. So I see a lot of that. But as far as giving the player enough action to kind of make it around, I think this is super tough because I guess it depends on just what that player's VPIP you feel like that is and what he's showing down.
I can tell 100.
100? He's playing every single hand?
Every single hand coming in with a gigantic raise.
So let's say... Okay, I mean, obviously your VPIP should be different depending on your position. God, this is so weird.
See, that was the thing. So it's like, and it's always me and him heads up. Always. I mean, I bluffed him a few times. Showed him the bluff. He loved that. He bluffed me, show me the bluff. He loved, bluffing, calling, all that, hero calling. But I felt like I was on the kind of like on the border of like playing good and not like giving too much action and kind of started kind of tip on the wrong side.
Well, your stack size is so important here because what was your stack size?
Man, the game was so swingy. I was up to like 17 for a while, went down to like 400, back up to 17 again. Just back and forth, right?
So I think like the big thing here is not only like how much action you're giving, but with what hands you're giving. Because like when you're at 2,000 deep, and you probably want cards that at least have the possibility of stacking. All of a sudden 5-6, 5-7 suited and stuff like that. But when you're going down to 500 against a player who's playing like this, those almost need to be completely out of your range.
Right.
Where, now, like, we say, like, we hate King 10, Queen 10, but against a player like this, if you get down to 500 or 600 and all the money's going in there so easily, you need to play hands that you're just going to make top pair.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think not only how much action, but it's very dependent on what cards you're giving the action with what stack size.
Have you ever noticed that the players like that though? If no one's playing with him other than me, you can imagine my hands are not King 10 and Queen 10, right? It's looser than that,
Well, yeah, I think but I would say, like, you need, like, and not so much like it has to be Queen 10, King 10, but it needs to be cards capable of making top pair. Like, or like a pair of aces, or something like that. Well, cards that will hit often but don't need to be nutted, I think is what I'm really going with.
Gotcha. And then how tough is it to play against somebody who will just always bet? gigantic with 8 high or the nuts.
I mean, it's definitely, I don't know if tougher, but the variance is off the charts.
I mean, because I had one where, like, I had, like, 4-5, and the flop came 7-7-5, and this guy just barreled, and I called him down, right? And on the river's a 10. And because he check raised me on one of my, he called his check raise, which was gigantic, right? And that was a pretty nice call at the time. And then the river's a king, and he checks it, and I was like, well, the hands I kind of thought he was on just hit.
Okay.
So I checked it back, and he was bluffing with just king high, the whole, just no draw other than the king. I mean.
But that goes back to, man, it's like not tough because you were ahead. It's just the variance because, when they do hit, they hit so big.
Well, I mean, it is still tough, though, to call a check raise. Remember, I bet, I'm thinking about like 35, and he check raised it to 250.
Oh, 100%.
On a paired board. I mean,
yeah.
That's tough.
Oh, no, that's 100% tough. Yeah, that is definitely. I don't know. Like, when I play against players like this, I just kind of forget like how they're playing and play my hand in like a vacuum. And basically, I take a strong hand as a strong hand, and like if I'm playing with like a solid player like you, and all of a sudden I have top pair, but it's it's like 7-8, queen or something, and I got queen jack or something, and you re-raise, I'm thinking of folding. Because there's a lot of hands that you have here that either are going to have a huge amount of equity or have me crushed. But a player like that, you just kind of try to put my hand in a vacuum and play it just on the strength of the hand. Because if their actions are making no sense, it's kind of tough.
I mean, I'll kind of conclude. I mean, this is going to be kind of a short podcast. Well, it's not that short. It's going to be over 30 minutes. But that hand was kind of summed up. Well, I ended up making the nut straight on one hand, turning it.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, this is a perfect time. Like, it ended up making like the front door. Like, I was hoping he might have been on the flush draw or something. I mean, I was hoping he was on something, right? 2 pair,
right.
Set, something. So I ended up raising him on the turn whenever I turned the nut straight with I had Jack 9.
Okay, nice.
And it was the Jack high straight. And he folds, like, it was like, no, not even queen. It was just like 8-3 offsuit or something. Or he had no pair. It must have been like 5-3 or something. It was just like, see, I didn't even have a hand. Just instantly mucked it. And I was thinking, like, man, I could have got so much more on the river because he was not going to stop whenever you have a hand like that.
Oh, because he was obviously going to bluff?
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's
that's kind of tough. I mean, yeah, it's hard to read that hand like that.
I mean, that's what I was saying. It's just kind of tough whenever someone will bet with literally nothing and just try to get you to fold and do the same thing with the monster.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, that's a lot of how your strategy comes into play is because, I mean, you're very balanced. I mean, of course, he's not balanced. I mean, really, in all honesty, most of the times he's betting is probably air, actually, because it's hard to make monster hands. But
yeah,
I mean,
true.
so like, yeah, I mean, but yeah, someone who's willing to, even beginners or kind of crazy people, if they're willing to put all their chips in there, for a gigantic amount, I mean, it's still hard to call light because guess what? Those people are still going to hit hands. So yeah, it definitely feels like you're just walking in a field of landmines.
Oh, I forgot. There's one more interesting hand before we go for this week.
Okay.
So I was playing a multi-way pot with that player, and I had pocket 5s, right?
Okay.
And I was like, oh, I'm pretty sure he's bluffing, right? And then, but the problem was there's another player in the... Man, I was not playing well, because I was like playing against this guy, and I was treating it like we were heads up. It was multi-way.
Right.
Basically, on the river, it completed a very obvious straight, like, I think it ended up being like, it was, I'm trying to think, it ended up being to where like King Queen was the nut straight, right?
Okay.
And we check it through to the guy in the, not the crazy guy, not me, the guy on the button who was in the hand with us, 3-handed.
Right.
He ends up betting like pot. And I was like, ooh, you know, it'd be kind of put him in a rough spot if I check raised him gigantic. And I ended up check raising him like, because I think he bet pot. So I check raised him like 3.5x his bet.
Okay.
And I think, you know, I mean, it was a gigantic bet. And he folds the second nuts face up.
Oh, wow.
And the dealer was like acting like he called. I was like, he mucked, man. Put that right in the muck.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't even show my hand right now. And then that tilted that guy. I ended up getting a ton of value later on, just playing a different hand because he thought I was over bluffing, which in that case probably was.
I mean, that's a great move because I will say this. I mean, I'm probably never going, if I'm going to do that move, I'm going to want one of the blockers to the straight in my hand.
As you should. As you should. That's a great ground rule. I mean, you should really consider that.
But yeah, I don't. Wow. I mean, if you get someone to lay down second nuts, that's a great hand. I mean, but getting these people to lay down middle pair is fucking hard. I mean, if you're getting them to lay down second nuts, that's a great move.
Takes a lot of money. Takes big bets. But I guess overall, you know, crazy players, I still find it kind of hard to deal with. But I guess, you know, in Houston, you'll get lots of practice.
Yeah, this is the place to get tons of practice with that.
Yeah, and I guess it's found our New Orleans stories our experience is a bit different. But next week we'll be talking about I'll be going to Vegas, so we'll be able to talk about where I'm going, where I should go, where I haven't been, and all the sorts of stuff. So we'll see you guys next week. Bye.
That was the Texas Poker Podcast. Go ahead and rack up, add time, and we'll see you next week.